They call this place the Conclave Amphitheater, and for 50,000 galactic cycles, it has stood as the beating heart of civilized space. A vast, spiraling chamber carved into the upper atmosphere of Ethel Prime, where the air itself is filtered through crystalline spires that sing with the soft, harmonic frequencies of diplomacy. It is a place designed to inspire awe, to remind every delegate who steps through its gravity-sealed doors that they are part of something larger than themselves, something ancient, something permanent. Today, the amphitheater is full. The great rings of observation decks ripple with the colors of 100 species. The feathery crests of the Xylos syndicate traders gleam under the soft light, their multifaceted eyes calculating potential profit in every gesture. The heavy, armored forms of the Varnak Protectorate sit in rigid silence, their breathing masks hissing with each measured exhale, their claws resting on ceremonial blades that have drawn blood across a dozen subjugation campaigns. The Thylid Collective pulses with bioluminescent patterns, their gelatinous forms shifting within containment fields as they process information through shared consciousness. And at the center, upon the raised dais that floats above them all, sit the Ethel, the first ones, the architects of Accord. They are elegant in a way that makes other species feel unfinished. Tall, slender, with skin the color of burnished silver and eyes like pools of deep water. They move with a grace that speaks of millions of years of evolutionary refinement, their long fingers steepled beneath sharp cheekbones as they observe the assembly with the patient tolerance of elders watching children at play. Their robes shift through subtle gradients of blue and violet, woven from threads that capture starlight and hold it prisoner. High Chancellor Vorin stands at the central podium, his voice carrying through the chamber not through amplification, but through the careful manipulation of the atmosphere itself. The crystals in the spires resonate with his words, delivering them to every delegate as though he were standing beside them. The final matter of this convening, he announces, and the chamber falls silent with the weight of tradition, concerns the admission and integration of a newly ascended species. Designation: human. Homeworld: Sol 3. Species classification: bipedal, carbon-based, oxygen breathers. FDL development: achieved 14 standard cycles ago. A murmur runs through the assembly. New species are not uncommon. The galaxy is vast, and every few centuries, another race stumbles through the veil of light speed and peers out at the stars with wonder in their eyes. They always come to the Accord. They always sign the charter. They always take their place among the lesser powers, grateful for the stability, the protection, the order that the Ethel have maintained since before their ancestors learned to walk upright. It is the natural order of things. Chancellor Vorin gestures, and a holographic display shimmers to life above the dais. It shows Earth, blue and green and white, swirling with clouds, spinning slowly against the velvet black of space. The image shifts to show cities, not the graceful spires of the Ethel, but sprawling, chaotic masses of light and structure. Bridges hang between impossible towers. Vehicles swarm through canyons of glass and steel. It is noisy. It is messy. It is alive. The standard charter has been prepared, Vorin continues. In accordance with tradition, the humans have been presented with the terms of integration. These terms are generous, as they always are for new species. They will retain sovereignty over their home system. They will be granted protectorate status under the Accord's military umbrella. In exchange, they will cede claim to uninhabited systems within their expansion sphere to the Accord for equitable distribution among the member powers. They will adopt Accord standards for trade, communication, and judicial review. They will pay the standard tribute, 3% of gross interstellar product, to support the continued operations of the Conclave and its peacekeeping forces. He pauses, allowing the weight of the words to settle. It is, as always, a fair and equitable arrangement. The Xylos delegates exchange glances. 3%, a small price for access to markets. Their traders are already calculating the value of human industry, human labor, human consumption. The Varnak shift in their seats, less interested in economics and more interested in the strategic position of those uninhabited systems. Border worlds, resource nodes, future staging grounds. It is, as always, a fair and equitable arrangement. For them, Chancellor Vorin looks down at the data slate in his hand, and for the first time, a flicker of something crosses his ancient features. It is not confusion. The Ethel do not experience confusion. It is closer to puzzlement, a mild intellectual curiosity, like a scholar encountering a minor discrepancy in an otherwise flawless text. There is, however, an irregularity. The chamber stirs. Irregularities do not happen. The Accord does not permit irregularities. A faction among the human population has rejected the Charter. They call themselves the Terran Sovereignty. They have refused to sign. Silence. Absolute, perfect silence. Then, from the Xylos delegation, a sound that is somewhere between a chitter and a laugh. It ripples through the assembly, spreading like contagion. Refused? Refused? The idea is so absurd, so fundamentally incomprehensible, that it can only be met with amusement. A child refusing to eat. A hatchling refusing to leave the nest. It is the tantrum of primitives who do not understand the universe into which they have stumbled. The Terran Sovereignty, Vorin repeats, his tone carefully neutral, claims to speak for approximately 43% of the human population. They have issued a counterproposal. More laughter. A counterproposal. As if the Charter were a market stall, open to haggling. What, asks a Varnak commander, his voice a grinding rasp, do they propose? Vorin reads from the slate, and if his composure cracks by even a fraction, it is imperceptible. They propose full sovereignty over all systems within 50 light-years of their homeworld. They propose equal standing within the Accord, with voting rights proportional to population. They propose the right to maintain independent military forces. They propose exemption from tribute for the first century of integration. They propose revision of the Judicial Oversight Clause to require human consent for any legal proceeding involving human citizens. The laughter stops. What replaces it is something harder, something colder. The Xylos stop chittering. The Varnak lean forward, their breathing masks hissing faster. The Thylid pulses with patterns that translate roughly to confusion edged with alarm. This is not negotiation. This is not a tantrum. This is a rejection of the fundamental principles upon which the Accord is built. The Ethel, Vorin says, and now there is steel beneath the silk, have declined to entertain this counterproposal. The Terran Sovereignty has been informed that the Charter is not a matter for debate. It is the price of admission to civilized space. They have been given one standard cycle to reconsider. And if they do not, the Varnak commander's claws tap against the armrest of his seat. Vorin is silent for a long moment. When he speaks, his words carry the weight of 50,000 years of unchallenged authority. Then they will be designated as a rogue species. They will be excluded from all Accord trade, all Accord protection, all Accord cooperation. They will be isolated. They will wither. They will learn, in time, that the stars are not given freely. They must be earned through acceptance of the order that preceded them. He turns, his silver face catching the light of the crystalline spires. The conclave will now vote on a resolution to affirm the Ethel's position and authorize sanctions should the humans fail to comply by the deadline. All in favor. The hands rise. Not all at once, but in waves. The Xylos, eager to see the upstarts punished for disrupting commerce. The Varnak, hungry to witness the lesson. The Thylid, following the collective will of the majority. One by one, the species of the Accord raise their appendages, their tentacles, their claws, their manipulators. It is unanimous. Almost. In the farthest corner of the amphitheater, in a seat reserved for observers and Fusues, a single human stands. She is small by the standards of the galaxy. Fragile. Soft. Her skin is pale, her hair the color of harvested grain, her eyes the blue of an alien sky. She wears no ceremonial robes, no diplomatic finery. Just a simple jacket with a patch on the shoulder that reads, Terran Sovereignty, Diplomatic Corps. Her name is Kaelin Vance, and she is the only human in the room. She does not speak. She does not protest. She simply watches as the vote concludes, as the sanctions are authorized, as the deadline is set. She watches as the ancient powers of the galaxy dismiss her species with a wave of their hands, consigning them to isolation and irrelevance. And when the session ends, when the delegates rise and begin to file out, chattering among themselves about the amusing folly of primitive races, she remains standing, still, silent. An elderly Ethel functionary approaches her, his expression one of mild condescension. "You may return to your embassy now," he says. "I trust you will convey the conclave's decision to your leaders." Kalen turns to him, and for a moment, the functionary sees something in her eyes that gives him pause. It is not anger. It is not fear. It is something he has never encountered in all his centuries of service. It is certainty. "I will," she says, her voice soft but steady. "And they will convey something back to you." She walks away, her footsteps echoing through the vast, crystalline chamber, and the functionary watches her go with a strange, uncomfortable feeling he cannot quite name. Behind her, the conclave amphitheater shines with the light of 1,000 suns. It does not move at the speed of light, for light is far too slow for an empire that spans 1,000 suns. It moves through the whisper networks, a sprawling, chaotic web of data relays, quantum-entangled transmitters, courier drones, and old-fashioned ship-to-ship gossip that has bound the Accord together for longer than most species have existed. News travels on trade winds and military channels, through backroom deals and casual conversations in spaceports. It flows like water through the cracks, and by the time the Ethel Conclave had officially recorded their vote, the news was already spreading through the darkness between stars. The humans said no. At first, it was a curiosity, a joke shared between Xylos traders over glasses of fermented methane. "Did you hear? The new species. They tried to negotiate with the Ethel. Can you imagine?" Laughter in the trading posts. Shakes of the head in the cargo bays. Primitive fools. They'll learn. They always learn. But the joke did not die. It spread instead, carried on the whisper networks, and as it traveled, it changed. The laughter faded. The curiosity sharpened into something harder. Because the humans, it turned out, had not simply said no. They had said no, and then they had closed their borders. They had said no, and then they had gone silent. Every Accord ship that approached the Sol system was met with a single, repeating message on all frequencies. Terran sovereignty space. Transit by Accord vessels prohibited until further notice. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. No threats, no demands, just a quiet, absolute refusal to engage. And the galaxy, for the first time in 50,000 cycles, did not know how to respond. On Xylos Prime, the Syndicate Council convened an emergency session. The chamber was a masterpiece of corporate efficiency. Not the ancient stone and crystal of the Ethel, but polished metal and holographic displays. Every surface designed to maximize information flow and minimize wasted motion. The Syndicate Council did not sit on thrones or podiums. They floated in anti-gravity harnesses above a vast trading floor, their multifaceted eyes scanning endless streams of data that flickered through the air around them. High Trader Zixel rotated slowly, his harness humming with barely contained energy. "Report," he demanded. "What do we know about these systems?" A junior trader projected a holographic map of the space surrounding Sol. A dozen star systems glowed with the soft amber of uninhabited classification, worlds rich in heavy metals, gas giants heavy with rare isotopes, asteroid fields dense with minerals that would fuel Xylos factories for centuries. Under the Standard Charter, these systems would have been ceded to the Accord for distribution. Under the Standard Charter, the Xylos Syndicate would have already been negotiating purchase rights. But the humans had not signed the charter. "The Terran sovereignty claims these systems," the junior trader reported. "They have not physically occupied them, but they have flagged them. Their vessels patrol the approaches. They have established automated monitoring stations." Zixel's antennae twitched with irritation. "Patrols? Monitoring stations? How many vessels? What class?" "Unknown, High Trader. The humans have not revealed their military capacity. They have not conducted war games. They have not issued threats. They have simply posted notices, like a shopkeeper hanging a closed sign on his door. A ripple of chittering laughter ran through the council. A closed sign, as if the galaxy respected signs. The Varnak are massing near the border, another trader observed. 3 dreadnoughts, 12 support vessels. They are waiting for the deadline to expire. Zixel considered this. The Varnak. Warriors. Brutes. Useful for applying pressure, but lacking in subtlety. If the Varnak moved first, they would claim the disputed systems by force, and the Xylos would be left with nothing but the scraps of a conquered territory. No, Zixel decided. We will not wait for the Varnak. We will move first. Quietly. A survey fleet. Commercial vessels, lightly armed. If the humans respond, we document their aggression and return to the Accord for redress. If they do not respond, we establish a presence. A mining operation. A trading post. By the time the deadline arrives, possession will be 9/10 of the law. The council hummed with approval. This was the Xylos way. Not war, but opportunity. Not conquest, but acquisition. Let the Varnak bang their drums and sharpen their claws. The syndicate would simply walk in and take what they wanted while no one was watching. Authorized, Zixel declared. Dispatch the Swift Gain and her support vessels. I want a foothold in the disputed zone before the next cycle turns. The council dispersed, and the machinery of commerce ground into motion. 1,000 light-years away, on the bridge of the Varnak dreadnought Unyielding Judgment, Commander Thrax watched the same holographic display with very different eyes. The Varnak did not float. They stood. They stood because sitting was a posture of weakness, and weakness was a luxury the Varnak could not afford. Thrax's massive form filled the command chair, his armored hide scarred by 100 battles, his breathing mask hissing with the recycled atmosphere of a ship that had never known peace and never wanted it. The deadline approaches, his tactical officer reported. 12 cycles remain. The humans have not responded to any further communications. Thrax's claws tapped against the armrest. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm as old as his species, the beat of blood and battle. The Xylos are moving, another officer added. A survey fleet. They will reach the disputed zone before we do. Thrax's lip curled beneath his mask. Xylos. Traitors. Cowards who measured victory in profit margins and defeat in quarterly losses. They would slither into the disputed systems, plant their flags, and then cry to the Accord when the humans inevitably pushed back. And if the humans did not push back? If they proved too weak to defend their claims? Then the Xylos would claim the spoils, and the Varnak would be left with nothing but the memory of an opportunity lost. No, Thrax growled. We will not allow it. He rose from his chair, his massive form casting a shadow across the bridge. The humans have refused the charter. They have rejected the order of the Accord. By every law of civilized space, they have declared themselves rogue. And rogue species do not deserve the protection of borders they cannot enforce. He turned to face his officers, his yellow eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 conquests. Dispatch a message to the syndicate. Inform them that the disputed zone falls within Varnak area of interest, and any unauthorized vessels will be considered hostile. Then prepare the fleet for transit. We will not wait for the deadline. We will move to the edge of the zone and wait. And when the deadline passes, we will teach these humans the first lesson of the galaxy. His officers snapped to attention, their claws striking their chests in salute. What lesson, Commander? Thrax smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. That borders are not signs on a door. Borders are blood and steel. Borders are the willingness to kill and die for every inch of claimed space. And these humans, they have never killed for their borders. They have never died for their claims. When they see what that costs, they will understand why the charter exists. They will beg to sign, and we will be there to watch them crawl. The bridge erupted into activity as the war machine lurched into motion. But not all the whispers spoke of war and conquest. In the depths of the Thyllid Collective, where the gelatinous forms drifted through chambers of nutrient fluid and shared consciousness, a different kind of discussion was taking place. The Thyllid did not have leaders in the way other species understood the term. They had consensus. They had flow. They had the slow, deliberate processing of information through millions of individual minds linked in a web of shared awareness. And the information flowing through that web was troubling. The humans, the collective pulsed, their bioluminescent patterns shifting through shades of amber and deep blue. They are not responding as expected. The Thyllid had observed many species ascend to the stars. They had watched the Xylos emerge from their corporate hive minds, driven by acquisition. They had witnessed the Varnak claw their way out of their death world, driven by conflict. They had studied the Ethel rise from their ancient seas, driven by order. Each species followed patterns. Each species fit into predictable categories. But the humans? They are not unified, the collective observed. The Terran sovereignty speaks for less than half. The rest of their world remains silent. And yet the silence was not the silence of submission. It was the silence of something building, something beneath the surface. The Thyllid could feel it in the faint signals leaking from Sol, the stray transmissions, the civilian broadcasts, the endless chatter of a species that never stopped talking to itself. There was no fear in those signals, no panic, no desperate pleas for negotiation. There was only work. They are building, the collective pulsed. Not weapons, not warships, something else, something we cannot identify. The Thyllid did not understand. They processed the data, compared it to every known pattern of species behavior, and found no match. The humans should be afraid. They should be negotiating. They should be sending emissaries, begging for extensions, pleading their case to any power that would listen. Instead, they were building. And the collective, for the first time in its existence, felt something that might have been unease. On Ethel Prime, in the crystalline spires of the Chancellery, High Chancellor Vorin received the reports with the serene detachment of a being who had seen empires rise and fall. The Xylos are moving early, his aide reported. The Varnak are positioning for conflict. The Thyllid are troubled. Vorin waved a slender hand. Let them move. Let them posture. It changes nothing. Nothing, Chancellor. Vorin turned to face the vast window that looked out upon the gleaming spires of the capital. The light of the Ethel sun bathed his silver features in warmth, but his eyes remained cold. The humans have made a choice, he said. They have chosen isolation over integration. They have chosen pride over pragmatism. In 12 cycles, that choice will become permanent. Their borders will mean nothing because no one will recognize them. Their economy will collapse because no one will trade with them. Their technology will stagnate because no one will share with them. He paused, watching a flock of crystalline birds spiral through the spires. This is not a conflict, my aide. This is a lesson. The humans will learn, as every species before them has learned, that the galaxy does not bend to the will of the stubborn. The galaxy has rules. The galaxy has order. And the galaxy will continue to turn long after the humans have faded into obscurity, remembered only as a cautionary tale for the next species foolish enough to believe they could stand alone. His aide bowed. And if they do not fade? Vorin's expression did not change. Every species fades eventually, even the Ethel. The only question is whether they fade with dignity, as part of something greater, or alone, forgotten, in the dark. He turned back to the window. Send word to the human embassy. Inform them that the Chancellery will receive their surrender at any time before the deadline. After that, the doors close. Permanently. The aide departed, and Vorin stood alone, watching the light play across his ancient city, secure in the knowledge that 50,000 years of order could not be undone by the tantrum of a single stubborn species. He did not see the young human woman, Kaelin Vance, standing in the embassy across the city, looking up at the same sun with those strange blue eyes. He did not hear the message she was composing, the words she would send back to a world that was, even now, building something the galaxy had never seen. He did not understand that the whispers spreading through the networks were not the death rattle of a doomed species. They were the first murmurings of a storm. On Earth, in a facility buried deep beneath the Siberian permafrost, Dr. Eris Thorne looked up from his console as the message arrived. He read it once, twice. Then he turned to the team of engineers and scientists who had not slept in 3 days, who had not gone home in 3 weeks, who had not given up in 3 months. They've set the deadline, he said. 12 cycles. About 2 weeks, in real terms. The room was silent. 20 faces, smudged with grease and dark with exhaustion, looked back at him. 2 weeks, one of them repeated. A young woman with dirt under her nails and fire in her eyes. We'll never finish in 2 weeks. Eris smiled. It was a tired smile, a worn smile, a smile that had seen too many failures and too few victories. But it was real. Then we'd better get started, he said. Because they're expecting us to beg. They're expecting us to crawl. They're expecting us to show up with our tails between our legs and sign whatever they put in front of us. He stood, and the exhaustion seemed to fall away, replaced by something else. Something that had driven humanity across oceans, across continents, across the void between stars. They don't know us yet. They don't know what we're building. They don't know what we're willing to sacrifice. But they're going to find out. He turned to the vast holographic display that dominated the facility, showing a schematic so complex, so ambitious, so utterly insane that no other species in the galaxy would have even dared to imagine it. Let's show them what happens when you give humanity an ultimatum. The room erupted into motion, and the work continued. And in the darkness between stars, the whispers grew louder. There is a word that exists in every language of the Accord. It is not a word of diplomacy or commerce. It is not a word of war or peace. It is a word so ancient, so fundamental, that it predates writing, predates civilization, predates the very concept of society. The word is no. And in 50,000 years of galactic order, no species had ever spoken it to the Ethel and meant it. Oh, there had been refusals, of course. There had been negotiations that dragged on for decades, treaties that required endless revision, concessions wrung from reluctant delegates over centuries of patient diplomacy. But always, in the end, the answer was yes. Yes to the charter. Yes to the order. Yes to the place that was offered, no matter how small, no matter how humble, because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. The alternative was the dark. The alternative was standing alone against the weight of 1,000 suns. And so, when the humans said no, when they refused to sign, when they closed their borders and fell silent, the galaxy did what it had always done when faced with the incomprehensible. It assumed they were lying. On Xylos Prime, the survey fleet assembled with the quiet efficiency of commerce backed by centuries of experience. 5 vessels, led by the Swift Gain, a mid-sized trader modified with extra shielding, and a discreet weapons array that definitely violated Accord regulations, but which the Syndicate had never officially acknowledged existed. They were not warships. They were not invaders. They were simply entrepreneurs, seeking opportunity, establishing presence, doing what traders had always done, which was go where others were too afraid to go and take what others were too slow to claim. Captain Vex stood on the bridge of the Swift Gain, his multifaceted eyes sweeping across the display that showed the course ahead. 12 systems, 12 opportunities, 12 chances to plant the Syndicate flag before the Varnak arrived with their claws and their cannons and their primitive notions of honor. Status, he demanded. All vessels report ready, his first mate replied. Course plotted. We reached the first disputed system in 3 standard days. Vex's antennae twitched with satisfaction. 3 days. The Varnak were still massing at the border, waiting for the deadline like obedient soldiers. The Ethel were still sending diplomatic notes that no one was reading. The Thylid were still pulsing with concern about things they couldn't understand. And the humans? The humans were silent. Send the signal, Vex ordered. We move at full burn. I want to be unloading mining equipment on the 3rd planet before the Varnak even finish their morning prayers. The fleet lurched into motion, and Vex settled into his command chair with the comfortable satisfaction of a predator who knew exactly where his next meal was coming from. He did not notice the tiny automated probe that drifted past his hull, no larger than his fist, its sensors recording everything. He did not detect the signal it sent, coded in a protocol no Accord species had ever encountered. He did not know that 3 light seconds away, a human monitoring station logged his arrival and transmitted the data onward at speeds that defied the laws of physics as the Accord understood them. He was a predator, yes, but he had never hunted humans before. 12,000 light-years away, on the border of the disputed zone, Commander Thrax watched the Xylos fleet's trajectory with barely contained rage. "The fools," he snarled, his claws digging grooves into the armrest of his command chair. "The blind, greedy fools. They're going to trigger the humans before we're in position." His tactical officer leaned forward. "Should we accelerate our approach, Commander? We could intercept before they reach the first system." Thrax considered. The unyielding judgment was faster than the Xylos traders. They could catch them, certainly. They could even force them to turn back, if they were willing to risk the diplomatic incident. But the Xylos would cry to the Ethel, and the Ethel would frown, and the whole delicate machinery of Accord politics would grind into motion, and by the time it stopped, the deadline would have passed anyway. No, he decided. Let them go. Let them be the first to feel the humans' response. If the humans fight, we will see their capabilities. If the humans run, we will see their weakness. Either way, we learn. And if the humans do nothing? Thrax's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the bridge. Then the Xylos claim the systems, and we have lost nothing but a little pride. But if the humans do nothing? He leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow across the tactical display. Then they are exactly what we thought they were. Bluffers. Pretenders. Children playing at Empire. And when the deadline passes, we will take from them everything they were too weak to keep. The unyielding judgment held position, and Thrax waited, his claws tapping that endless rhythm against the armrest, counting down the moments until the lesson could begin. On Earth, in the facility beneath the Siberian permafrost, there was no waiting. There was only work. Dr. Eris Thorne had not slept in 72 hours. Neither had anyone else in the room. They had passed beyond exhaustion into something else, something that felt almost like clarity, like the universe had slowed down just enough for them to see the connections between things that had always been invisible before. The schematic on the holographic display had grown more complex over the weeks. What had begun as a theoretical framework, a wild idea scribbled on napkins and whiteboards, had become something real, something tangible, something that existed not just in the minds of dreamers, but in the physical world, taking shape in orbital shipyards and asteroid mining facilities and construction platforms scattered across the solar system. "We have a problem," a voice said. Eris turned. It was the young woman from before, the one with dirt under her nails and fire in her eyes. Her name was Mira, and she was the best systems engineer he had ever worked with, which meant that when she said there was a problem, there was a problem. "Show me." She led him to a secondary display, where a cascade of error messages flowed across the screen. The resonance coupling. It's not stable at scale. We can get it to work for individual units, but when we try to network them, the phase synchronization breaks down. The power fluctuations would tear the whole system apart. Eris studied the data. She was right. The mathematics was elegant, the theory was sound, but the implementation was failing. They had hit the wall. The same wall every revolutionary technology hit. The point where theory met reality and reality said not yet. How long to fix it? Mira shook her head. I don't know if we can fix it. Not in 2 weeks. Not in 2 months. This is fundamental. We're asking the universe to do something it doesn't want to do. The room fell silent. 20 faces, gray with exhaustion, looked at the display. 20 minds that had given everything to this project, that had sacrificed sleep and health and sanity, that had believed with all their hearts that they could build something the galaxy had never seen. And now the universe was saying no. Eris stared at the error messages for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was not a laugh of humor. It was not a laugh of despair. It was the laugh of a man who had spent his entire life pushing against walls, who had learned that the universe's no was just the beginning of the conversation. Of course, he said. Of course it doesn't want to do it. That's the whole point. Mira stared at him. What? Eris turned to face the team. Think about what we're building. Think about what it means. Every other species in the galaxy, when they reached the stars, they looked for order. They looked for rules. They looked for someone to tell them how things worked. and then they built their societies around those rules. The Ethel have been following the same laws of physics for 50,000 years. The Xylos have been trading the same way for 30,000. The Varnak have been fighting the same wars since before their ancestors grew claws. He gestured at the schematic, at the impossible thing they were trying to build. But we're humans. We don't accept the rules. We don't accept no. When the universe tells us something can't be done, we ask why, and then we ask why not, and then we ask what if, and then we go out, and we do it anyway. He pointed at the error cascade. The universe says this won't work. Fine. Then we make it work. We don't accept the failure. We don't accept the limit. We find another way. We go around. We go through. We go over. We keep pushing until the universe gives up and lets us through. Mira was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was the smile of someone who had just remembered something important. You're insane, she said. Probably, Eris agreed. But insane is what got us here. Insane is what got us out of the trees and onto the moon and across the stars. Insane is what we do best. He turned back to the schematic. Now, let's figure out how to tell the universe that its no isn't good enough. The room erupted into motion again, but this time the energy was different. The exhaustion was still there, the sleepless nights and the aching muscles and the desperate race against a deadline that loomed closer every second. But underneath it, there was something else. Something that had driven humanity since the first cave person looked at a saber-toothed tiger and thought, I can take it. Defiance. Pure, stubborn, irrational defiance. On Ethel Prime, in the embassy that the Accord had grudgingly allowed the humans to maintain, Kaylin Vance received the latest dispatch from Earth. She read it twice, then a third time. Then she set it down and looked out the window at the crystalline spires of the ancient city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, and the beauty of it struck her with unexpected force. Her people were 5 weeks away at best possible speed. Her people were outnumbered, outgunned, out-teched by species that had been traveling the stars since before Earth had multicellular life. Her people were building something that the greatest minds of the galaxy said was impossible, and she had never been prouder to be one of them. The door chimed. She turned to find an Ethel functionary standing in the entrance, his silver features arranged in an expression of patient condescension. The High Chancellor requests your presence, he said. He wishes to discuss the terms of your surrender before the deadline expires. Kaylin looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was the same smile Eris had worn in the Siberian facility, the smile of someone who had just remembered something important. Tell the High Chancellor, she said, that I will be happy to meet with him. But I will not be discussing surrender. The functionary's expression flickered. I beg your pardon. I will be discussing the terms of humanity's continued existence as an independent species. I will be discussing the boundaries of our territory and the rights of our citizens. I will be discussing trade agreements and diplomatic recognition and all the things that sovereign nations discuss with each other. She stepped forward, and for a moment, the functionary saw something in her eyes that made him take an involuntary step back. But I will not be discussing surrender. That word is not in our vocabulary. It never has been. And if 50,000 years of galactic order haven't taught you that yet, then you haven't been paying attention. The functionary stood frozen for a moment, his ancient mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Then, without another word, he turned and left. Kaylin watched him go. And then she turned back to the window, to the setting sun and the crystalline spires and the weight of 50,000 years of unchallenged authority. So, she murmured to herself, let's see what happens when you finally meet someone who knows how to say no. In the disputed zone, the Swift Gain dropped out of FTL and began its slow approach to the third planet. Captain Vex surveyed the system with satisfaction. It was perfect, rich in minerals, stable orbits, no signs of habitation. The humans had claimed it, yes, but claims meant nothing without presence. And there was no presence here. No ships, no stations, no colonies, just empty space, waiting to be taken. Begin scanning, he ordered. I want a full survey of the asteroid belt within 24 hours. His crew set to work, and Vex settled back in his chair, already calculating the profits. This was going to be even easier than he had thought. He did not notice the faint distortion in the gravity well of the third planet. He did not detect the network of sensors buried in the asteroid surfaces, watching his every move. He did not see the signal that flashed from one rock to another, then another, until it reached a facility hidden in the shadow of a moon and triggered a response that had been waiting for this moment since the day the humans first said no. 3 light seconds away, a human monitoring station logged the Swift Gain's arrival. And then it sent a message. Not a threat, not a demand. Just a simple, quiet statement of fact, broadcast on every frequency the Xylos vessel might receive. You have entered Terran sovereignty space. This territory is claimed and protected. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Failure to comply will result in consequences you cannot imagine. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. Captain Vex read the message, and for a moment, something flickered in his multifaceted eyes. Something that might have been caution. Something that might have been the first stirrings of doubt. Then he laughed, and the moment passed. Primitives, he said. Ignore it. Continue the survey. His crew obeyed, and the Swift Gain moved deeper into the system, deeper into the territory that humans had claimed and protected and refused to surrender. Behind it, in the shadow of the moon, something began to stir. Something that had been built by hands that did not know how to quit. Something that had been powered by minds that did not accept the word no. Something that was about to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. IT remembers the birth of stars and the death of worlds. It remembers the first Ethel ships rising from their ancient seas and the last cries of species that could not adapt to the order that followed. It remembers every war, every treaty, every empire that rose and fell in the long darkness between suns. But it has never remembered a silence like this. On the bridge of the Xylos survey vessel Swift Gain, Captain Vex watched his crew work and tried to ignore the growing unease in the pit of his thorax. The human message had been ignored, as planned. The survey had continued, as planned. The first mining drones had been deployed, as planned. Everything was going according to plan. So why did he feel like something was watching him? Status, he demanded, perhaps more sharply than necessary. Survey at 43% complete, his first mate reported. No sign of human vessels. No sign of human activity. The system appears completely empty. Vex's antennae twitched. Empty. The humans claimed this system, but they hadn't even bothered to put a single monitoring station in it. No colony, no patrols, no infrastructure of any kind. It didn't make sense. Unless they were bluffing. Unless their claims were exactly what the Accord had assumed. The empty posturing of a species that didn't understand what it meant to hold territory. Continue, Vex ordered. I want full survey completed within. The lights flickered. It was nothing. A momentary fluctuation, the kind of thing that happened 1,000 times a day on any vessel. But Vex felt his antennae go rigid, because the lights on the Swift Gain had never flickered. Not once. Not in 30 years of service. Report, he snapped. His engineering officer was already at his station, data scrolling across his display. Minor power fluctuation in the secondary distribution node. It's stabilizing now. I don't understand. That node has never. The lights flickered again. This time, every display on the bridge flickered with them, and a low hum rose from the deck plates, a vibration that Vex felt in his bones. What is that? He demanded. I don't know, his engineer replied, and there was something in his voice that Vex had never heard before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. It's coming from everywhere. The primary reactor is stable, the backups are offline, the distribution network is showing cascading failures across. The hum became a whine. The whine became a scream. And then, with a sound like the death of a star, every system on the Swift Gain went dark. Not failed. Not shut down. Dark. The lights died. The displays went black. The life support systems fell silent. The artificial gravity flickered and died, leaving the crew drifting in zero-G, their claws scrabbling for purchase on suddenly useless consoles. Vex floated in the darkness, his multifaceted eyes wide, his mind refusing to accept what his senses were telling him. The swift gain was dead. And then, through the silence, a sound. A voice. Coming not from the ship's speakers, which were dead, but from somewhere else. Somewhere outside. You were warned. The words echoed through the hull, through the vacuum, through the very fabric of space itself. Vex did not know how he was hearing them. He did not know how it was possible. He only knew that they were real, and that they filled him with a terror he had never imagined possible. You were warned, and you did not listen. Now you will learn what it means to trespass on human territory. Outside the viewport, in the darkness between stars, something began to glow. 12 light hours away, on the bridge of the Varnak dreadnought Unyielding Judgment, Commander Thrax watched the tactical display with growing confusion. The Xylos vessel has stopped transmitting, his sensor officer reported. All signals ceased approximately 3 minutes ago. No distress call. No warning. Nothing. Thrax's claws tightened on his armrest. Interference? System failure. Unknown, Commander. We are detecting something. An energy signature from the third planet. Very faint. Very strange. Thrax leaned forward. Show me. The display shifted, showing a holographic representation of the disputed system. The swift gain was a dark dot near the third planet. And near that dot, spreading outward like ripples in a pond, was something the sensors could not quite identify. It was not weapons fire. It was not a ship. It was a field, a distortion, a wave of something that moved through space and changed everything it touched. What is that? Thrax demanded. No one answered, because no one knew. And then, on the display, the swift gain vanished. Not exploded, not destroyed, just gone. One moment it was there, a dark dot against the starfield. The next moment, the sensors showed nothing. Empty space, as if the vessel had never existed. The bridge of the Unyielding Judgment fell silent. Thrax stared at the display, his mind racing through every possibility, every scenario, every lesson from 1,000 battles. He had seen ships destroyed. He had seen ships captured. He had seen ships torn apart by enemy fire and swallowed by gravitational anomalies and lost to the endless dark. He had never seen a ship simply cease to exist. Full military alert, he growled. All hands to battle stations. I want every sensor active, every weapon charged, every fighter ready to launch. Something is out there, and I will know what it is before it finds us. The bridge erupted into activity, but beneath the rush of preparation, there was something else. Something that Thrax had never felt in all his years of conquest. Doubt. On Ethel Prime, in the crystalline spires of the Chancellery, High Chancellor Vorin received the news with the same serene detachment he had maintained for millennia. The Xylos vessel is gone, his aide reported. The Varnak are on full alert. The Thylid Collective is agitated. Vorin's silver features showed no emotion. Gone. Explain. We do not know, Chancellor. The sensors detected an energy signature, then the vessel disappeared. No debris. No life pods. No survivors. It is as if it was simply erased. Vorin was silent for a long moment. Then he rose from his seat and walked to the window, looking out at the crystalline spires of his ancient city. The humans, he said. It was not a question. We have no proof, Chancellor. But the timing. The humans, Vorin repeated. They warned us. They warned the Xylos. They said there would be consequences. His aide shifted uncomfortably. But Chancellor, such technology does not exist. No species in the Accord can erase a vessel from existence. It is impossible. Vorin turned to face him, and for the first time in living memory, there was something in his ancient eyes that looked almost like uncertainty. Impossible, he repeated. That is what we said about their refusal to sign the charter. That is what we said about their rejection of our terms. That is what we have said about everything they have done since they first emerged from their system. He paused. Perhaps we have been using that word too freely. The aide had no response. Because what could he say? The impossible was happening. The order of 50,000 years was crumbling. And at the center of it all was a species that should have been grateful for any scrap of recognition, any crumb from the table of galactic civilization. A species that had said no, and meant it. In the disputed zone, the Unyielding Judgment held position, its weapons charged, its crew waiting for an enemy that refused to appear. Commander Thrax paced the bridge, his claws tapping that endless rhythm against his thigh, his mind racing through 1,000 tactical scenarios. The humans had done something to the Xylos vessel, something that defied every law of physics he knew. But what? And how? And most importantly, could he fight it? Contact, his sensor officer shouted. Multiple contacts. Emerging from behind the third planet. Thrax spun to the display. And there, emerging from the shadow of the world where the swift gain had vanished, were ships. Not warships, exactly. They were too small, too irregular, too strange. They looked like nothing the Varnak had ever seen. No sleek hulls, no standardized weapon mounts, no recognizable design philosophy. They looked like someone had taken a dozen different ship designs and welded them together with desperation and genius. They looked human. How many? Thrax demanded. 12. No, 15. No, wait. The sensor officer's voice cracked. Commander, they're multiplying. Every time I try to count them, the number changes. They're doing something to our sensors. Thrax stared at the display. The sensor officer was right. The human ships were flickering in and out of existence, their positions shifting, their numbers changing with every scan. It was like trying to count shadows in a forest at dusk. Weapons, he ordered. Target the lead vessel. Fire when ready. The unyielding Judgment's main cannon cycled up, its massive energy banks discharging in a single, devastating beam of pure destruction. It was a weapon that had shattered planetary defenses, that had torn through enemy fleets, that had never failed to destroy whatever it touched. The beam lanced across the void and struck the lead human ship, and passed straight through. Thrax watched, his jaw hanging open beneath his breathing mask, as the energy beam continued onward, through the ship, through the space where the ship should have been, through the entire formation of flickering, impossible vessels. It hit nothing. It damaged nothing. It simply passed. Commander, his tactical officer whispered, they're not there. I mean, they are there, but they're not. The sensors can't lock. The weapons can't hit. It's like they're between. Between what? Thrax snarled. Between here and somewhere else. Between now and some other time. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what I'm seeing. On the display, the human ships continued their slow advance. Not toward the unyielding Judgment, not toward anything in particular. They simply moved, and as they moved, the space around them changed. The stars flickered. The background radiation shifted. The very fabric of reality seemed to ripple in their wake. And then, one of them spoke. Not through a transmitter. Not through any medium the Varnak could detect. The voice simply appeared in the minds of every being on the bridge, clear and calm and utterly terrifying. You came to teach us a lesson. You came to show us the cost of defiance. You came because you believed we were weak and primitive and alone. The voice paused, and in that pause, Thrax felt something he had not felt since he was a hatchling, facing his first predator on the death world of his birth. Fear. You were wrong. The human ships stopped their advance. And then, gently, almost gently, they began to do something that made Thrax's mind recoil in horror. They began to take the unyielding Judgment apart. Not with weapons. Not with force. They simply reached out with fields and forces that the Varnak could not see, could not detect, could not understand, and they began to disassemble the dreadnought piece by piece. The main cannon detached from its mount and floated away into the void. The armor plating peeled back like the skin of a fruit. The bridge module separated from the hull, leaving Thrax and his crew floating in a bubble of atmosphere, watching their ship dissolve around them. And still, the voice continued. You came to take what was ours. You came because you believe that might makes right. That power is the only language the galaxy understands. You were right about one thing. Power is the only language you understand. The last pieces of the unyielding Judgment drifted away, and Thrax floated in the void, his breathing mask hissing, his crew huddled around him, watching the human ships that surrounded them on all sides. So let us speak to you in that language. One of the human ships moved closer, its hull resolving from the flickering chaos into something solid, something real. A hatch opened, and a figure emerged. Small, Fragile, soft, human. She floated toward them, her suit gleaming in the starlight, her face visible through her helmet's visor. She was young. She was unarmed. She was alone. And she was the most terrifying thing Thrax had ever seen. "Commander Thrax," she said, and her voice came through his suit's speakers now, normal and calm and utterly human. "I am Mira Chun, engineer, Terran Sovereignty. You came to our space to teach us a lesson. Would you like to know what we've learned?" Thrax could not speak, could not move, could only stare. Mira smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was not a triumphant smile. It was the smile of someone who had just explained something very simple to a very slow student. "We learned that the universe doesn't care about your rules. We learned that 50,000 years of order is just 50,000 years of doing things the same way, over and over, while the galaxy changed around you. We learned that the only limits that matter are the ones you accept." She gestured at the wreckage of the unyielding judgment, at the human ships that surrounded them, at the stars that watched in silence. "We did not accept your limits. We did not accept your order. We did not accept your no. And now here we are, and here you are, and the lesson is over." Thrax found his voice at last. What do you want?" Mira considered the question for a moment. "We want you to go home. We want you to tell the Accord what you saw here. We want you to explain that humanity is not a species to be conquered or controlled or contained. We are not interested in your empire or your order or your rules. We are interested in the frontier. We are interested in what lies beyond the places you have already claimed. We are interested in being left alone to build something new." She turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Commander? The Xylos vessel. The Swift Gain. They're not dead. We just moved them. They're about 50 light years that way, in a system with no FTL capabilities and no way to call for help. They'll be fine. They'll just have to walk home." She smiled again, and this time there was something in it that Thrax almost recognized, almost understood. "That's the thing about humans, Commander. We don't like killing. We'd rather teach. But we will defend what's ours. We will protect what we've built. And we will never, ever accept a no from someone who has no right to give it." She returned to her ship, the hatch closed behind her, and the human vessels began to fade, flickering back into whatever space between spaces they had emerged from. Thrax floated in the void, surrounded by the wreckage of his command, and watched them go. And for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be truly, utterly defeated. On Ethel Prime, the news arrived like a thunderclap. The Xylos fleet was gone. The Varnak dreadnought was destroyed. The humans had not only fought back, they had done so with technology that defied every known law of physics, with tactics that made no sense, with a restraint that was somehow more terrifying than any act of vengeance could have been. High Chancellor Vorin sat in his chambers, alone, staring at the data slate that contained the full report. He had been wrong. 50,000 years of unchallenged authority, and he had been wrong about the humans. Wrong about their weakness. Wrong about their intentions. Wrong about everything. They had not been bluffing. They had not been posturing. They had simply been busy, building something while the galaxy talked, preparing something while the galaxy dismissed them, waiting for the moment when words became actions, and then acting in ways no one could have predicted. The door chimed. He did not respond. It chimed again, and then it opened, and Kaylin Vance walked in. She stood before him, small and fragile and utterly unafraid, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vorin looked up, and in his ancient eyes, there was something that had not been there for millions of years. Humility. "You have one," he said. "What do you want?" Kaylin considered the question. Then she smiled, and it was the same smile Mira had worn in the void, the smile of someone who had just explained something very simple to a very slow student. "We don't want anything from you, Chancellor. That's the point. We never did." She turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the weight of 50,000 years of certainty crumbling to dust around him. And in the darkness between stars, the storm that humanity had built continued to grow. It is too vast for that, too ancient, too set in its ways. Stars are born and die in the time it takes for a single species to evolve from primordial ooze to interstellar civilization. Empires rise and fall across cycles so long that they leave no memory behind but dust. Change, true change, moves at the pace of geology, of astronomy, of time itself. But sometimes, very rarely, something happens that changes everything in a single moment. Sometimes, a new variable enters the equation. And the old order, no matter how ancient, no matter how powerful, no matter how certain, must either adapt or die. On Ethel Prime, the conclave amphitheater was full once more. But the silence that filled it now was very different from the silence that had greeted the human rejection. That silence had been amused, condescending, certain. This silence was something else entirely. The delegates from 100 species sat in their rings, their colors muted, their postures rigid. The Xylos representatives had stopped chittering entirely. Their multifaceted eyes were fixed on the central dais, where the Ethel sat in their ancient seats, their silver faces unreadable. The Varnak delegation was smaller than before. Commander Thrax had not yet returned from the disputed zone, and no one knew if he ever would. The Thyllid collective pulsed with patterns that no one could quite interpret, patterns that shifted too quickly, that spoke of confusion and fear and something that might have been wonder. And at the center of it all, standing where no human had ever stood before, was Kaelin Vance. She had not been invited, not officially, but when she had walked through the great doors of the amphitheater, flanked by no guards, accompanied by no delegation, the Ethel guards had parted before her. They had not known what else to do. The rules did not cover this situation. The protocols did not apply. She had simply walked in, and now she stood before the assembled powers of the galaxy, and she waited. High Chancellor Vorin rose from his seat. His movements were slower than usual, heavier, as if the weight of 50,000 years had suddenly become unbearable. Kaelin Vance of the Terran sovereignty, he said. His voice carried through the chamber as it always had, resonating through the crystalline spires, reaching every ear with perfect clarity. But the authority that had always underpinned that voice was gone, replaced by something else, something that sounded almost like respect. You stand before the conclave without invitation. You stand before us in the aftermath of events. The conclave wishes to understand. The conclave wishes to know what it is that humanity wants. Kaelin looked around the chamber. She saw the Xylos traders, their profit calculations shattered by the disappearance of their fleet. She saw the Varnak warriors, their claws twitching not with aggression but with uncertainty. She saw the Thyllid collective, pulsing with patterns that asked questions no one knew how to answer. She saw the Ethel, the first ones, the architects of accord, waiting for her to speak. And she saw something else, something she had not expected to see in 1,000 lifetimes. She saw fear, not the fear of violence, not the fear of conquest, but something deeper. The fear of irrelevance, the fear of being wrong, the fear that everything they had built, everything they had believed, everything they had sacrificed for over 50,000 years might be based on a lie. She took a breath. You want to know what we want, she said. That's a fair question, and I'll answer it honestly. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We don't want your territory. We don't want your tribute. We don't want your submission or your servitude or your fear. We never did. A murmur ran through the assembly. Confusion. Disbelief. Then why? A Xylos trader burst out. Why reject the charter? Why destroy our ships? Why humiliate the Varnak? If you don't want anything, why cause chaos? Kaelin turned to face him, and her eyes were steady. Because you didn't ask us what we wanted. You told us. You presented a document, written by species who had never met us, never spoken to us, never tried to understand us. And you said this is your place in the galaxy. Accept it or be nothing. She let the words hang in the air. How would you have responded? The traitor had no answer. None of them did. We are not like you, Kaelin continued. We are not like any species you have ever encountered. Our history is not one of stability and order. It is one of chaos and change and constant, relentless motion. We have risen from caves to stars in the blink of a cosmic eye. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest or the most adaptable, but because we never stopped asking questions. We never stopped pushing. We never stopped saying no to the limits the universe tried to impose on us. She began to walk, slowly, through the rings of delegates. They parted before her, unconsciously, as if she carried some invisible force field. You built an empire on certainty. You built an order that has lasted 50,000 years because you eliminated every variable, suppressed every question, crushed every species that dared to challenge your assumptions. And it worked. For 50,000 years, it worked. She stopped in the center of the chamber, beneath the great crystalline spires that sang with the harmonics of ancient power. But we are the variable you never accounted for. We are the question you never asked. We are the no that you never heard before. And now you don't know what to do with us, because we don't fit your categories. We don't follow your rules. We don't accept your order. High Chancellor Vorin stepped forward, his silver features troubled. Then what, he asked, are we to do with you? How do we coexist with a species that refuses to be part of the system? Kalen smiled. It was a gentle smile, almost sad. You don't, she said. That's the point. You don't do anything with us. We're not yours to manage. We're not yours to control. We're not yours to fit into your categories and your systems and your order. She turned to face him directly. We're leaving. The silence that followed was so complete that Kalen could hear her own heartbeat. Leaving, Vorin repeated. Leaving for where? There is nowhere to leave to. The galaxy is mapped. The stars are claimed. Every system, every world, every resource is yours, Kalen interrupted. All of it. Yours. Claimed and mapped and cataloged and controlled for 50,000 years. And it's beautiful in its way. It's orderly. It's stable. It's everything you ever wanted. She shook her head. But it's not what we want. She gestured, and above the dais, a holographic display flickered to life. It showed a map of the galaxy, the Accords galaxy, with its neatly defined territories and trade routes and spheres of influence. Then it zoomed out. Farther, farther, past the galactic core, past the spiral arms, past the outer rim where even the Ethel had never ventured. There's more out there, Kalen said quietly. More than you ever looked for. More than you ever wanted to find. Because finding it would mean admitting that your order isn't complete, that your knowledge isn't final, that there are still questions you haven't answered. The map continued to zoom, showing the void between galaxies, the vast emptiness that the Accord had always assumed was simply empty. We don't know what's out there, Kalen admitted. We don't know if we'll find life, or worlds, or anything at all. But we're going to look. We're going to push. We're going to ask questions that have never been asked and see where the answers take us. She turned back to the assembly. That's what we want. Not your territory. Not your tribute. Not your order. Just the freedom to be what we've always been. Curious, stubborn, restless, and utterly unwilling to accept that the universe has no more surprises left. The delegates stared at her, some with confusion, some with disbelief, some with something that might have been envy. High Chancellor Vorin stood motionless for a long moment. Then, slowly he bowed. Not the deep bow of submission, but the slight incline of the head that one ancient being gives to another when they recognize something worthy of respect. You are unlike anything we have ever encountered, he said. You are chaos wrapped in flesh. You are questions wearing the shape of answers. You are human. Kalen nodded. We are. And you will go into the dark? Into the unknown? Into places where no order exists, where no rules apply, where everything must be built from nothing? Yes. Vorin was silent for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been forming in every mind in the amphitheater. Why? Kalen looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw something he had not seen in 50,000 years. Something he had forgotten existed. Wonder. Because it's there, she said simply. Because no one has seen it before. Because the universe is vast and strange and full of things we don't understand, and we want to understand them. Because that's what we do. That's who we are. She turned to go, then paused. You asked what we want. I've told you. Now I'll ask you something in return. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate in turn. When we're gone, when we've vanished into the dark, when we're no longer your problem, when the chaos we've caused has faded and your order has reasserted itself, will you remember us? Will you remember that there was once a species that looked at your perfect, stable, eternal empire and said no thank you? Will you remember that there are still questions worth asking, still frontiers worth crossing, still mysteries worth pursuing? No one answered. No one could. Kalen smiled one last time. I hope you will. Because if you forget, if you let your order become so complete that you stop wondering what lies beyond it, then you'll have lost something more valuable than any territory, any tribute, any empire. She walked toward the doors. And if you ever get bored, if 50,000 years of stability ever starts to feel like 50,000 years of stagnation, you know where to find us. We'll be the ones asking questions no one else thought to ask. We'll be the ones pushing boundaries no one else dared to push. We'll be the ones, out there in the dark, still saying no to every limit the universe tries to impose. The doors opened before her, and she walked through, into the light of the Ethel sun. And the conclave amphitheater was silent for a very long time. In the Sol system, the great work was nearly complete. Dr. Eris Thorne stood on the observation deck of the largest construction platform humanity had ever built, watching the final pieces fall into place. Around him, thousands of vessels moved in a carefully choreographed dance, shuttling supplies and personnel and equipment to the ships that would carry humanity into the unknown. Not warships, not colony ships, not anything the Accord would recognize. They were arcs. Generation ships, yes, but generation ships with a difference. They carried not just people, but entire ecosystems. Not just supplies, but the capacity to create anything from raw materials. Not just knowledge, but the questions that knowledge had not yet answered. They carried humanity itself. Mira joined him at the rail, her face smudged with grease, her eyes bright with exhaustion and excitement. The last of the resonance couplings just came online, she reported. Phase synchronization is holding steady at 97%. We're ready to test the full network. Eris nodded. And the Accord? Mira shrugged. Watching, waiting, trying to understand. Kalen's speech made it to every corner of the galaxy. Some of them get it. Most of them don't. But they're not stopping us. I think they're too afraid to try. Good, Eris said. Fear is healthy. Fear means they're learning. He looked out at the arcs, at the thousands of ships, at the millions of people who had chosen to leave everything behind and venture into the absolute unknown. Do you think we'll make it? Mira asked quietly. Out there, I mean. Do you think we'll survive? Eris considered the question. It was a good question. The kind of question humanity had been asking since the first cave person looked at the stars and wondered what was up there. I don't know, he admitted. Probably not. Probably most of us will die. Probably the universe is full of things that will kill us without even noticing we're there. He turned to her, and his eyes were shining. But some of us will make it. Some of us will find something. Some of us will look back at this moment, at this leap into the dark, and they'll know that it was worth it. Because that's what we do. That's who we are. Mira smiled. You're insane. Probably, Eris agreed. But insane is what got us here. Insane is what got us out of the trees and onto the moon and across the stars. Insane is what we do best. He looked back at the arcs, at the impossible thing they had built, at the future they were about to create. And insane is what's going to carry us to places no one has ever imagined. On Ethel Prime, High Chancellor Vorin stood alone in his chambers, watching the same images that were being broadcast across the galaxy. The human fleet was moving. Slowly at first, then faster still. They were not heading for the core, not heading for the contested systems, not heading for anything the Accord recognized as valuable. They were heading out, toward the rim, toward the void, toward the darkness between galaxies where no species had ever dared to go. His aide entered quietly. Chancellor, the Conclave requests guidance. They want to know how to respond. They want to know what to do about the humans. Vorin was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was softer than it had ever been. Tell them, he said, to do nothing. Tell them to watch. Tell them to remember. Remember what, Chancellor? Vorin turned from the window, and in his ancient eyes, there was something that had not been there for millions of years. Something that looked almost like hope. Remember that the universe is larger than our order. Remember that there are questions we have not asked, frontiers we have not crossed, mysteries we have not solved. Remember that for 50,000 years, we have been content with what we have. And now, a species we dismissed as primitive has shown us what we have been missing. He looked back at the image of the human fleet, growing smaller as it headed for the dark. They are not our enemies. They are not our subjects. They are not our problem. They are our future. They are what we might have been if we had not been so afraid of the unknown. His aide frowned. I don't understand, Chancellor. Bourne smiled. It was a small smile, a fragile smile, a smile that had not been seen on Ethel features for longer than any living being could remember. Neither do I, he admitted. But I think, for the first time in 50,000 years, I am ready to learn. In the darkness between galaxies, the human fleet moved on. Behind them, the Milky Way glittered like a jewel against the velvet void. Ahead of them, there was nothing. No light, no stars, no order. Just the endless, absolute unknown. Kaylin Vance stood at the observation window of the lead arc, watching her home galaxy shrink to a point of light. Beside her, Mira and Eris stood in companionable silence. Well, Mira said finally, we did it. We said no to the entire galaxy, and we walked away. Eris grinned. Told you we would. Kaylin smiled, but her eyes were on the darkness ahead. What do you think is out there? Eris shrugged. No idea. That's the point. Mira nodded. Stars, worlds, life, or nothing at all. Either way, we'll find out. They stood together, three humans at the edge of everything, watching the void that stretched before them like an unanswered question. And behind them, in the galaxy they had left behind, 100 species watched them go. Some with relief, some with confusion, some with envy, and a very few, with something that felt almost like longing. Because they understood, at last, what they were witnessing. They were watching humanity become what it had always been meant to be. Not conquerors, not rulers, not builders of empires or enforcers of order. Explorers, questioners, the ones who looked at the dark and said, I wonder what's out there. The ones who looked at the impossible and said, let's try anyway. The ones who looked at the universe and said, no. The fleet continued on, growing smaller and smaller against the vastness of the void. And in the conclave amphitheater, in the crystalline spires of Ethel Prime, in the trading halls of Xylos and the war rooms of Varnak, in the collective consciousness of the Thylid, a single thought echoed through the minds of every being who had witnessed what humanity had done. They had rejected the order of 50,000 years. They had walked away from everything the galaxy had to offer. They had chosen the unknown over the known, the question over the answer, the journey over the destination. And for the first time in its long, ordered, stable existence, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.